Okay, it is 9:03. Today is Thursday, October 28th, and this is the monthly Wayside Cleanup office hours where you can hear whatever news that we have and then really open it up to issues that you want to talk about, questions that you might have that we may or may not give answers to, at least in the short term. Because much of this stuff is not easy and easily answered. So for us, the big news here continues to be kind of going back to the office and how we're going to do that. The DEP staff on the call, I'm sure we'll quickly chime in and say that we don't really know a lot of details. We're expecting more over the next few weeks, but or the next week, but starting next week, November 2nd, we are beginning to ease back in the expectation that by the end of the calendar year, staff will generally be coming in on some regular schedule, at least once a week, and figuring out how to transition to kind of a more consistent schedule. Some people coming in 1 day a week, some people coming in 3, some people coming in 5, and we'll figure out what that is and how it's going to work. So it's a little bit kind of unnerving for some of us because it's we don't have the answer. We don't know exactly in mid-January when we're going to go in and who's going to be there when we get there and how all of it is going to work, but we're going to try to be patient and let it play out and see what you folks are doing as well, learn from other people's experiences. And but we are going back to, I think the big news for the outside world is that does mean reopening the offices more than they have been for external people to be coming in for meetings, for file reviews. And again, how that is going to work is going to be a work in progress. But starting next week, we should begin to be seeing that. And I know some of our staff have been starting to go in more frequently to Wayside Cleanup Boston. We don't get a lot of outside visitors necessarily, but it's nice to have a different workspace to go to. So more on that as it develops, but the long term again is us to the Salt and Salt building with permanently 50% capacity and a long-term kind of flexible teleworking approach. That hopefully will make a good work environment. Be able to do what we need to do, meet with people we need, meet with, collaborate with our coworkers, but also have the flexibility to work from a remote location. So, it's Shangri-La. The Salt and Salt building is Shangri-La. And we'll be there no earlier than the end of April, apparently. So that's what we're doing, which is really fun. The other stuff we're doing, of course, is PFAS. All PFAS all the time for some of us, it appears. And the PFAS task force, our legislature finished up the last session, I think, last week. And
did they discriminate between PFAS and phthalates?
Did they? I think they were.
Did you enjoy that article confusing PFAS and phthalates, showing the level of scientific illiteracy?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a little bit beyond getting too upset about things like that. But our task force, for the most part, I think we're on topic. They had some great speakers going in. The link has been floated around. You can probably get to it as well by Googling Massachusetts legislature PFAS interagency task force, something like that. They do have the videos for all the past meetings up. So you can follow along. So I think they are positioned, good position to be in to, as a legislative body, consider their options and where they want to go with PFAS going into the future. So it will be interesting to see. The DEP, of course, is willing and able to kind of help out any way that they ask us to, with technical things or policy or answering questions. So we'll see where that goes. And as a legislative task force, to the extent that other people may have kind of thoughts that you might want to convey to the task force, contacting the individual members would certainly be appropriate. That's what they're there for. So all in all, I was kind of impressed at kind of how thoughtful and that the whole process has been. So it's good to see. We'll see what comes out of it, of course. The other big thing was EPA kind of making their PFAS move in the past week or so and putting out their roadmap, which I'm going to, well, actually, before I share my screen, I'm going to make Liz co-host because I'm beginning to sense that sharing my screen is what kills my meetings.
I'm just listening.
Liz, where did you go?
She's still there, Paul.
I see her. I'm just not there we go. Make co-host. Yeah, I wasn't seeing her on the list, and that's because it was all capital letters, and I don't read that because it's yelling at me. Okay.
I didn't do that.
Yeah. Share screen. So the roadmap, goals, and objectives. Nice alliteration. Research, restrict, remediate. Are cleaning up the. A lot of things in there. I think the some of the important stuff for us is moving ahead on MCLs for PFAS and PFOA. Putting restrictions on use of the older materials in various ways. Hopefully that will help minimize future sites as we go ahead. Expanding the number of chemicals that they're digging in deep on, health advisories for Gen X and PFBS. They're also doing a lot in the toxicity assessment world. Recently came out with the final toxicity assessment for Gen X, and there's a whole bunch of draft things, Iris, out there for public comment. So they're accelerating that work. They're considering that yesterday or the day before came out the response to the New Mexico governor's petition to have PFAS considered hazardous waste and become a listed hazardous waste. So basically, they're kind of moving ahead in the process of studying whether they should do that. So it's not a promise, but in the meantime, they're also adopting policies and approaches which make it clear that in record corrective action, that cleanup of emerging contaminants that are not yet listed as hazardous wastes would be part of that corrective action work. Fish tissue monitoring, blah, 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 blah. PFAS and biosolids. So there's a lot of work going on with PFAS. This is the news release. Hopefully you can switch the news release from about the hazardous waste work as well. And what else? Task force record announcement, toxicity assessments, and the roadmap. Yeah, that's. And I was just on a SWAMO call. SWAMO being the Association of State and Territorial Solid Waste Management Officials. They had annual meeting, and they had somebody from the Department of Defense come and speak, and they were saying all the kind of right things about moving a large bureaucracy and being more nimble at addressing PFAS and promising to do better. So we'll see. But all of this is there's probably nothing strikingly new on the table in all of the EPA work, but they certainly seem to be well organized in how they're approaching it, and they're putting themselves on timetables to make it happen kind of on, if not fast, then on a kind of reasonable schedule. And they're showing a commitment to actually follow through on the work, which I think is all welcome for us. So those are the big things that have been on my mind. Liz, do you have anything you want to mention to the group?
No, I didn't hear your summary, Paul. Did you mention the setting the analytical method for PFAS too? Work on that.
Yeah, in the EPA roadmap, yeah, there's a lot of analytical work as well. If you haven't seen that roadmap, Google EPA PFAS roadmap for all of that, and that will kind of sift through all of that stuff. So it really is a good laundry list of work, and it will be taking up a lot of their time moving into the future. All of that, say, EPA Region 1 has always been very supportive in what the New England states have been doing over the past few years as well. So in some ways, this is the rest of EPA kind of getting in line and helping out as well. And it's probably no coincidence that the acting regional administrator was the co-chair of the task force as well, that EPA's group that was putting this together. Deb Swaro. So anything that's on your mind you want to ask or talk about?
I found the roadmap kind of general, Paul, myself. I feel like it was more of a plotting sort of, roadmap versus having, a lot of specifics and maybe biting off, focusing and prioritizing certain aspects and, sort of triaging things a bit more. So I don't know. I think it's so broad and so diverse, and that they're trying to do so many kind of big picture things allegedly almost at the same time, that it makes me concerned that it's just not it's gonna be glacial. I think it's
well, I mean, yes and
I hope
no. Well, first, I think compared to the last several years, I think this is a breath of fresh air.
True.
Having it consolidated, having some deadlines, they may not be as close as one might want, but it's definitely a commitment to be doing the work and to be held somewhat accountable, for it not happening, by having it listed very explicitly. And maybe I've just been in large bureaucracies too long. That what you view as plotting, I view as, okay, it's not as fast as it could be, but it for a large bureaucracy, it's fairly reasonable. And the good thing about a large bureaucracy is that EPA does have a lot of people that they can throw at this. So while it is a kind of very broad set of activities that are going on simultaneously, they're not done by the same people. And you can have EPA's Office of Water going through the process of setting drinking water standards while you have another group developing better analytical methods for a variety of different things. It's not like Massachusetts, I think we're in a good position because we have our own Office of Research and Standards, and we have a group that does some of that stuff, in some states don't. But I have 5 PFAS meetings on my calendar for today and tomorrow, or yesterday and today. And it's basically the same group of people, just slightly reshuffled, meeting to talk about different topics. If DEP were picking off that large list of projects, there was no way we would be able to do all of those things at the same time, because it is the same people. But because EPA is a large bureaucracy and they have a lot of staff and a lot of expertise they can throw at it, I at least have some hope. I'm going to look on the bright side of it, and this is what we need, and this is why states look to EPA to do a lot of this work, because they do have far more resources than we do. So I'm going to take the optimistic side of this.
All right, I'll be here when we need to talk about it. I'm definitely
We're taking bets on the timelines.
Okay. And speaking of timeline, Paul.
Oh, don't even go there, Lisa. Don't even go there.
I gave Liz the
Segue.
opportunity. I gave Liz the opportunity for that.
It was such a softball. I mean,
Oh, is that what you were referring to, Paul?
Well, just want to see if you want to say anything.
Well, we can't say anything specific. We are still in that final review stage, and we're still in that final review stage.
Yeah. So it's out of wayside cleanup. It's kind of off into the ether. We know exactly where it is, but it's these are the people above us, and they take the time that they need to understand what's in it and review it and give it the okay to move on to the next step. So
we haven't asked though on that, Paul and Liz. Could you guys give like the LSPA or the on the website like a heads up when you think it's maybe a week away, because there's a lot of us who are tasked with reviewing things and providing summaries to our membership, as well as the training I know you guys are going to be doing, but it would be really nice to just get a little bit of a heads up when you actually think it's maybe something like a week away, so that
I think we can do better than a week. I think once we know that the content is final, and then there's always a few, depending on the publication schedule, there's always either 2 weeks or a month. You have to catch the right week to publish it. But as soon as we know that the content is final, I think we can go ahead and post it and as an unofficial draft and start. We would let everyone know as soon as we could.
And then once it does get published in the register, then there will be an effective date that will be some period of time beyond that. So we're not trying to sneak up on people with it.
And to the extent we can, we'd like to try to fit the training in ahead of the effective date, or start to do some of the training ahead of that. So
that would be helpful.
Absolutely.
It gives us something to do. It'll be fun. And any other questions, comments, observations?
I've a totally different question, Paul, that I asked at the SAC meeting as well. I know that DEP is in the process of finalizing the AUL guidance, but I just want to make sure that the issue we discussed about poets is included. I'm sorry, I know I like totally move my head all the time. I'll try and stay still. I picked up on that. Do you know if or can you ensure that that's at least explicitly included in the AUL guidance? Because that's something that's definitely been remiss in the regs and the guidance previously.
I can assure you that it's already been drafted as part of the updates in that guidance.
Yay. Okay, any other questions, items? We have other things going on, like IT migration stuff that is messing around with our heads, but it doesn't really appear. Hopefully, it doesn't affect our interactions with the outside world. But we're continually upgrading our technology, which is cool. No, boy, you guys are quiet.
Paul, where's the link now for the status of the private well testing program for PFAS on the website? Do you have current data for that?
We can go look at that. Let's see. Try sharing the screen again. So easiest if you just use your PFAS shortcut and go to the our PFAS page. Now, I don't know why they have done this, but in order to get to the private well testing thing, I always go to on the main PFAS page in the testing sample collection for drinking water. I think it's somewhere in here. That there's a link to it. Yes. So it ends up being, if you search for Google for PFAS in private drinking water supplies FAQ, it should be there. And then the results page for PFAS testing in private wells is here. And that gives you the status, how many towns. And if you click on any town, like that one is Princeton. I happened to pick on Princeton. I did not do that intentionally. It's a 0 because that was in a different, the print sampling for Princeton is in a different, being done as site work. So you can click on the town, you'll find the results. You can also.
What was the sequence again? You went quicker than I could follow.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's probably easiest to just Google PFAS in private well drinking water supplies FAQ mass.gov.
Oh, okay.
But the sequence, if you want, you go to the main PFAS page, go to the laboratories testing and sample collection for drinking water. So
Yeah.
right below the public water supply stuff. And then there's a PFAS in private well drinking water supplies FAQ.
Oh, okay.
And that's the page that has it. It should be, I would think that this section should be in that main page, similar to the public well one. But there's that's going on. Kind of continuing to go on as we speak. We're getting hits in a couple imminent hazard levels, not a lot, but I think we're running about 5% of the private wells that we're seeing have elevated levels above 20 parts per trillion. So, and that's been fairly consistent of last couple months, I think, that 5% level.
Have you been able to determine in any way what kind of sources for those particular, that 5%?
Not completely, no. I mean, some of them are, the potential sources are more obvious than others. Out in Shutesbury, for example, we got elevated levels, including some that were imminent hazard levels, and you look across the street and there's the fire department. There are other locations, again in Shutesbury, where different part, these big town, different part of town, where you look around and it's not obvious where it's coming from. So that's kind of partly why we're doing this. We want to follow up on and are following up on cases where it's kind of more obvious what the source might be. There are cases where it might be industrial, or it might be who knows what else. There are all sorts of possibilities, and none of this is as is definitive as we would like it to be. And I mean, one of the whole point, one of the points of doing the sampling is to see what's out there and then look at the results and see if there's some pattern and some correlation, and where it is obvious, great. Where it isn't and requires more work, we'll be doing some of that work to try to find the PRP. And then in others, I mean, there may people throw out there other potential sources that might not be kind of 21E related, including things like atmospheric deposition and contributions from septic systems and other things that they might be perfectly plausible, but we're hoping that this will give us the data to draw some conclusions about that. One exciting thing is that we have, as you know, we have UMass, Amherst, and Lowell helping out on particularly coordinating the private well sampling stuff, but we also have, we do work with Worcester Polytech, having students come and do projects with us over the years. And the last few years, they've been working with the Central Region on some kind of big data projects, which have been really cool, kind of using our data, our reports that are submitted under 21E, and using artificial intelligence to try to draw conclusions or establish, identify patterns, that sort of thing. So it's been great for the students. They've migrated more. The students are now more computer engineering types rather than environmental engineers doing this work. But they are starting on a project that will be looking at the private well data as well and trying, using artificial intelligence, to make some of these connections and perhaps predict PFAS concentrations in drinking water based upon location, at some ideal future result of this. So we're looking at it. Some AI students are looking at it. Other researchers are looking at it. So hopefully we'll see some kind of patterns that we'll be able to, we'll be able to draw some conclusions from once we have a lot more of the data. And of course, there's a lot, other states and other groups are doing, similar things, and it's more than a full-time job to try to, pull this all in and figure out what it all means. So again, much like our return to work, we're counseling patients and recognizing that it's all a work in progress, and we hope to have some answers at the end of it. But while we're in it, it's going to be a lot of we don't know yet. Those WPI students have been doing some interesting work over the years, looking at things like IRAs and imminent hazards, and kind of identifying conditions based upon they machine read the PDF documents, and looking at frequency of words and placement of words, and all sorts of stuff that just blows my mind.
So Paul, for the few homes that have had more than 90, so we're considered imminent hazards, DEP has assisted those homeowners in getting some kind of mitigation system in when there's not an obvious source, correct?
Yep. So for something over 90, that's dealt with, ASAP. We will make sure that they have bottled water in the interim, and then work with them to figure out what installation of poets, essentially, to make sure that the water is addressed. And going down from 90 to 20 in that area where it's above the standard but not an imminent hazard, then kind of our level of involvement in working with them kind of varies, but it is always working with them to try so that they understand the need to mitigate their exposure, and also kind of where we can, we're not asking the homeowners to like go and sample neighbors' homes. That's something that we're picking up. So if you have somebody, whether it's 95 or 80, we're going to go and look and see what else might be out there.
But I think, like we've discussed previously, if there's no clear identifiable source, you're not considering it a quote release under the MCP. So there's not reporting obligations, or if for those people who might need a POET or install a POET, it won't need to be, an AUL type determination, correct?
The gist of it is correct. The language, of course, is always important, and I would recommend people actually look at the waste site cleanup related FAQs that go out to the homeowners on kind of what it all means. For example, there is a notification obligation. I mean that.
Yeah, I know that, but I've heard representation too that if in the absence of an identified source, I think waste site cleanup has been saying that they're not necessarily considering it a regulated release.
Well, different things, and not to like cut that hair too closely, but I would recommend the FAQ. First, as part of this homeowner sampling program, part of the agreement is them explicitly authorizing DEP to make that notification. So the notification is occurring. We are authorized agents for the homeowners to do that. So legally, regulatorily, that is covered. So there is, but once we have notification, then DEP does have flexibility in the figuring out where that site goes next, including who we send notices of responsibility for and triggering further response actions. And with this, and sometimes with other situations we run across as well, there are times when if we do not fully understand the situation, we may hold the NORs off in abeyance until we figure it out. So not triggering the rest of the MCP response actions yet. So
notification not equal to NOR is the key point.
Exactly.
Have you issued any NORs to homeowners?
Ever in our lives?
No. Just as part of this program. Has DEP issued any?
No, I do not believe that we have.
Have you assigned release tracking numbers to those?
Again, the semantics are important. We are tracking these locations because we want to know where they are. We don't want to lose them, and we also want to be able to look at the data and evaluate it to figure out what's going on. So we have tracking numbers. We have ways of tracking them. Are they the release tracking numbers that then appear in the searchable sites list? No, they are not. Tracking numbers are just tracking numbers, and so
they're LTBI.
If you want to go that far back, it is kind of LTBI. There's something out there, we don't fully understand it yet. We've initiated this big process and big testing program to help us understand it. So there are some decisions that are going to be put off, possibly until the end of the data collection and data analysis phase to figure out what we do with these. And I would anticipate that, at the end of all of this, we're going to look across at all the locations that are sampled, and particularly the places where we found something, and put them in boxes of, these are the situations, at these locations might indicate, and I'm going to say this without giving any credence to it, atmospheric deposition. This group might be there because there is they're right around the location of the annual carnival. And I say that only because carnivals are not yet related to PFAS. So, but some distinct feature that might be a source. And with those, then that group we might we think we've identified a PRP. We'll send the PRP and NOR. There are other situations we're not waiting to the end because we already have enough information to act on it and move. And those have not been NORs to homeowners. It's it's mostly typically it begins with our investigation and doing additional work around in the area and then figuring out more what's going on.
But I mean, this is obviously for the ones where no discrete sort of regulated release under the MCP is identified. These are becoming your background data set. And hopefully DEP will use a consistent approach. I mean, we've done it with soil, we've done it, with arsenic in water where there's elevated, concentrations. So, I mean, I'm hopeful that that's how, that's a key part from waste site cleanup's perspective of this collection of data. To get us.
And I'm just laughing because I'm not promising anything about what the conclusion is going to be because I have no idea what it's going to be. And the term background, of course, is kind of loaded with implications. But they're at the end of this, I expect that they're going to be different boxes with different outcomes because there's we're seeing a wide range of things. And there may be, a large box that we don't have a clear understanding of where the material is coming from. But what we're seeing are basically, if anything, if there is a source, then these locations are down gradient of it. And if there isn't a source, well, we're as befuddled as everybody else. But, and we'll act accordingly in that case too. So, I mean, whether you consider this to be background and ubiquitous and consistently present in all of that, the fact remains is that PFAS is man-made, so it is coming from somewhere, and that's what we're trying to figure out. And if it's coming from atmospheric deposition, then that leads down one course. But if it's coming from a point source somewhere, then we go in a different direction, and we may be seeing all of that. And all of that overlaid on top of each other. So as a former scientist and stuff, this is all exciting, interesting research. As a policy person, it is frustrating that I can't give you a straight answer for anything yet. But we're basically holding for things that need to be addressed now. DEP is stepping forward and making sure that they're getting addressed. For things that can wait until we have more information so that we can make a logical, consistent decision, then that stuff is waiting. And most of what we're seeing, it falls into that category, I think. Yeah, I know, not satisfying, but it is interesting.
Well, that's what counts, Paul.
I know, keeping me amused. Yeah,
Exactly.
So I understand you're doing poets for imminent hazard PFAS, but what about all these homeowners who are in the 20 to 90 range? What happens to them?
Well, that ultimately, and I think going back to the language of the Q&A, the homeowners, the quality of their water is ultimately their responsibility, or at least partly their responsibility. So we will work with them on kind of options that they have for bottled water, for treatment systems and all of that. But ultimately, we would hope that they would be installing or taking actions to minimize their own exposure. we're not expecting them to go out and sample their neighbors' wells. We're not expecting them to go out and do a full 21E site assessment. But if they find that they have PFAS in their water, if they find that they have elevated levels of arsenic in their water, ultimately it's going to be up to them to mitigate that. And there are, one of the things that certainly has come up in the task force is, are there ways of kind of supporting that? And that's probably a good question for the task force to address. We have programs, as you all probably know, for public water supplies that are affected by contamination and, lately PFAS. There's a state revolving loan fund, and there have been some grants available through the money we got from the legislature to help in planning treatment systems and the like. But there isn't a similar thing presently for homeowners. Yeah, and
I was just wondering.
You can look at it as kind of similar to homeowner oil spills.
I was just going to say that, Paul. I was thinking about that as a possible analogy, if you will, of, is that something, maybe something else they could help with, but the idea of, aren't you worried a little bit? I guess it can go either way, but if it's, hey, you let us in, and then, but if you do,
Well, that's one reason.
There are these economic implications. Are they, as word gets around, will that maybe harm your information data gathering?
Yes and no. We've seen it work both ways. And that's one reason why those FAQs were put together, to try to be as upfront as possible about what their long-term, short-term and long-term obligations might be, including some scary language about, in the absolute worst case, where you hosted a slip and slide foam party for all of the neighbors' kids, you might be a PRP. But and laying out kind of what the likely outcomes would be, and what their, if the FAQs go to, if it's above 90, here's how it might play out. If it's between 20 and 90, here's how it would play out. So going into it, the homeowners should have kind of an understanding of what they're getting into. And we've seen that work where people have been reluctant to sign up because of that. And we've had certainly a lot of cases where people signed up anyway. In Nantucket, we have a waiting list several hundred people long now for the 40 slot.
So Paul, you're not considering 20 to 90 range to be a critical exposure pathway for those homes?
We talked about that a couple sessions ago.
Well,
yeah.
I missed that, sorry.
Well, Barry, first, a couple of things. One, that as the regulator, as DEP, our statutory obligation for what we need to do is, if there's an imminent hazard, we have to take action. And one way or another, we have to make sure that that imminent hazard is mitigated, either by making sure somebody else does it, but if there's nobody willing and able to do that, we have to do that. The state is not a PRP. We are not, at least DEP is not a PRP for this. When we go and take actions to address those imminent hazards, then it is a CEP, but we are not one of the parties that required to eliminate all exposures all the time. That's ultimately not the state role to do that. What we will do is work with the homeowner so that they address the contamination, either through bottled water or treatment system somehow, so that their water is in fact potable. So, and so far it seems to be, working out. There's a lot of hand holding and talking. Both the UMass contractors talk with the homeowners, and then they're given a number of names to contact within the department for further follow-up. So I know the deputy regional directors are, in constant conversation with people that are coming up with elevated levels. And in some cases, then doing a lot of work to figure out what else is going on around them. So there, if you go through that list on the webpage of all the different results, you'll see that there are a number of locations where there's a lot of sampling being done, and some elevated levels that your DEP is following up on. PFAS all the time. What else you got? Nothing. All right. Yes.
Well, if nothing else, just quick question then, Paul.
Hold on, Matt.
Carol
Something in the
Willis wants
chat.
in.
In fact, I may have to put my video on for this. Two things. One is I put a note in the chat, even though my hair looks terrible. Sorry, being recorded. But I put a note in the chat about DEP awarding their technical assistance grants to 3 communities, which maybe you don't know about. Framingham was one of them, Barnstable, and forget the other one. But Barry Fogel said something about LTBI, and I think that was dating himself. But I also think that you should have a historical section. I went looking for my LTBI list, which I have still from 1987. The very first one, I think, was 86 or 87. I didn't find that, but I found this, which is the first draft in 1987 of the MCP regulations. Note, it's
Oh yeah, the nice thin one. Yeah.
FYI, this worked great.
It worked great. And Carol, were you with us at the time?
Yes, I was in the Alpha or whatever group it was called.
Yeah, so
And it was basically John Fitzgerald. John Fitzgerald is telling us what we were going to do, and we all go, okay, that sounds pretty good, John.
Yeah.
Let's stand that 2-page policy of phase 1 to phase 4.
Yeah.
Little did we think it would grow into
Well,
one.
that was pretty much do what John tells you to do.
Precisely.
And
And
it worked fine as long as you had John's attention.
that's right.
Or somebody
Yeah,
else.
if you want to go back there, you can start submitting all of your permit solution statements for final approval.
Yeah.
No, which is part of the reason I left DEP. So, anyway, I thought the tag grant was an interesting issue. So,
Yeah, we got 3 from 3 communities, Barnstable, Framingham, and Norfolk was the third one, for $15,000 each. And I wonder why. And we're somewhat disappointed, I think, that we didn't get a larger number. We're expecting a larger number and hoping for a larger number. And one of the kind of issues might be, one, applying for grants is just complicated. So community groups might not be as, and since we haven't done it for a while, they just may be out of practice, and the short time period might have worked against them. So one of the things we are considering is doing it on more of a rolling basis, so that one, there isn't that time element to it. People can apply when they get their stuff together and can apply. So we'll see come in the coming.
I think the biggest problem is for a small community group or advocacy group or nonprofit is actually managing the grant at that small dollar number. But a rolling grant would probably be good too. It would give people time to respond and sort that out, or get a partner.
Yeah. And then the other thing that you mentioned, which I'm trying to see now if I can find it. Somewhere on our website, and special award goes to whoever can find. Oh, there it is. Okay, here, let me share my screen again, and let me go back to. You're gonna like this, Carol. Screen 2. Okay, so here we are on wayside cleanups. Cleanup of sites and spills. If you get here, regulations, policies, and forms. You go there, and policies and guidance documents. Go there, and
Oh, no, not policy number 8.
no, well, we may have that, but over here in related links, Wayside Cleanup Historical Archive. So this has been a little side project that I'm doing as I sit here with my scanner beside me. 1988 version of the MCP. There you go. It has a little outdated
Great idea, Paul. Yeah.
thing there. Some other classics, and okay, personal bias. I wrote some of these, so I think they're classics. But a couple looking at the conservatism and uncertainty and risk assessment, the risk assessment, risk management document. So a number of older documents. The 1992 Advisory Committee report. So I'm sifting through them. In inventory of active and closed solid waste landfills, 1980, the first list. Going back, so there are some stuff there as we've been cleaning out our offices in anticipation of the move, finding some more things. So if you have anything that you'd like to flag for the archive, or that you think we might not have, forward them along. But there's some cool stuff there. That, and of course the DEP Flickr site has lots of old photographs. The photographs of people are set to private. So, but we do, if you have somebody you're trying to track down an old picture for embarrassment purposes for their retirement party, then let us know. And we've actually gone through, we meaning I have gone through and scanned them all, and we now have an organized way of looking for them as well. So
do we have the one of you at the podium with your bottle of Bacardi 151?
I don't think there was a photograph. If anybody has a photograph of that, okay. I was thinking before I'm gone at some point in the future, that recreating that kind of would be fun. So, we'll see. Speaking of CEPs, going back to Barry's comment, I believe that trading session in that the bottle of Bacardi was specifically for the issue of CEPs. Okay, with that, it's 9:57. We will let you know when the next office hours is. It occurred to me that the 4th Thursday of November, all of you will probably be busy, or at least want to tune in, because we'd be competing with the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. And I know where we would rank compared to that.
Are these office hours 1 hour meetings, or are they 9 to 12s like the advisory committee?
Oh, just 1 hour. This is the thing we used to do weekly, but now you're all doing other things, so we're only doing it monthly.
I'll fix my calendar.
Yeah. So having said that, good seeing you all. We'll talk to you again next month-ish.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Liz.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Lou.
Bye.
Bye.